And he's been an absolutely tireless campaigner about peace, about putting an end to violence. It's something he spent the last 12 years promoting. The 21st of September, I'm pretty sure all of you in this room know that is Peace Day. Peace One Day is the most amazing movement. It's all about driving an international ceasefire on this day, about pushing people to carry out humanitarian acts, and particularly in some of the most dangerous places in the world. And so, for example, 4.5 million children have now benefited from polio immunization as a result of Peace Day and agreements that happened in Afghanistan between 2007 and 2010. And that's amazing. It's an incredibly significant movement, but it's a movement that's not just about disarmament and guns. Their activities happen on a global scale in pretty much every country around the world, across all sectors and areas of society. And every single body is involved. And we talked a lot about collaboration and cooperation, the corporate sector, NGOs, business, schools, faith, different anti-domestic violence organizations. And Peace One Day records a reduction in violence from every area it engages with, across communities, across schools, across homes. And so it's something that's incredibly relevant to every single person. So we're going to welcome Jeremy to the stage. Before we do that, let's watch a little bit of a film about it. So if we could play the video, please.
My name's Jeremy Gilley. I'm an independent documentary filmmaker. In July 1998, confused and frightened by what was going on in the world, I decided to make a film about peace. Then I realized there was no day of peace. That was it. I was going to try and establish an annual day of ceasefire and non-violence, a peace day with a fixed calendar date. So I traveled the world to build and document a case for the day's existence.
The day could be the beginning of a deeper process. It has the practical impact of allowing access of humanitarian aid, access of information, freedom of movement, relief from the pressure and tension of not knowing where the next bomb or bullet may come from.
If you have one day of peace all over the world, I think that would be great. And it's a worthwhile cause to work for.
Any moment, whether it's a day or a week, that we can give the combatants to pause, to reflect on what they are doing to their people and the environment will be a great achievement, and I will support it 100%.
The United Kingdom and Costa Rican governments have now joined together.
I think it's very, very important, and I love what we're trying for.
The need for such an enhanced approach was originally brought to our attention by a UK-based non-governmental organisation, Peace One Day.
This is a step forward in international relations.
Be observed as a global ceasefire day.
Let's stand up on September 21st and let's begin.
May I take it that the Assembly decides to adopt draft resolution? It is so decided.
You know those things that you have in court that you whack? They whack one of them.
A peace day has been adopted by every member state of the United Nations. An annual day, separate from politics and religion. A day when every human being on Earth can become involved in the peace process. A day of global unity. A day when lives are saved. The message is spreading.
Over 100 million people in over 100 countries are marking the day today in many different ways.
It's up to our generation to build the foundation for a united world. And it'll grow. It'll really grow if you get behind it. So please mark Peace Day, 21st of September, and lives will be saved.
One individual may be small, but united and combined all 6 billion people, that will make a great difference.
If you build a house, you start with one brick. If we want to build peace, why not start with one day? And that day has arrived.
Give a huge welcome to Jeremy Gilley.
Well, looky here. Wow, thank you. Wow, what a massive honor to be here. Thank you to One Young World, Kate and David, for inviting me. I'm going to share with you quite quickly, what's going on. Effectively, I was concerned, I was frightened, I was disturbed, I couldn't understand the violence in the home, the community, in the school, and in the wider world, and I was confused and I was angry, and I wanted to do something about it. And as you know, the only thing that I had, the only skills that I got no qualifications, I'm dyslexic, I was bottom of the class, the only thing I knew was a film camera. And that was when I decided to use the film camera to try and create a day of peace in the way that you've just seen. And after years of work, I'm delighted. It was amazing that, it was unanimously adopted. And then when the day was created, I could hear the cynics saying, it's just a day, it's just symbolism, it's never going to work. And that was really frightening for me, having traveled the world and spoken to incredible people that were saying, if we create this day, there'll be less bullying in schools, there'll be less domestic violence, we can vaccinate, etc., etc. And people weren't believing in it. And I knew at that point that we had to continue, our journey and make sure we could prove a clear case that in the most impossible place, so they were saying, Afghanistan, we could see it work. And of course, Jude Law traveled with me. We went over there, we met everybody, ISAF, NATO, doctors, elders, Karzai, the UN, UNAMA. You name it, we met absolutely everybody. And then, of course, I was delighted when we got home that we saw a letter from the Mujahideen stating that they wouldn't harm any humanitarian workers. And that's what's opened the door to 10,000 vaccinators being able to go into areas that you couldn't normally go for fear of being kidnapped or killed. And they vaccinated 1.4 million children. And for me, that was kind of like the second act. Thinking as a filmmaker, the first act was creating the day. The second act was proving it could work. And that's when we get into exactly what I'm doing now. And what I'm about to show you is what I pretty much do on a daily basis. So if I press this here, the job that we now have to do, having created a day, and prove that it could work, is we need to institutionalize it. We need to make it self-sustaining. And there's a process at Peace One Day that we are carrying out, and of course you can be a part of, and in fact, many of you already have. We have to institutionalize this day. We need to make it self-sustaining. We need to make sure that every human being on the planet knows that the 21st of September is a day of ceasefire and non-violence. And no matter how they're involved, from a tweet to an activity, to a concert, to a vaccination, that is life-saving. And we need to create a methodology of measurement that proves that. And that's what's exciting me. After 13 years on the road of being in 97 countries, what excites me now is measuring it and coming up with the facts, a methodology of measurement that we're doing with McKinsey's. So, institutionalization of the day. McKinsey's are saying to me at the moment, I had the opportunity of meeting Dominic Barton and going to them and saying, you've got to help me, you've got to show the results of this. It's like, we've been on a climb, we're climbing up the mountain, and when you get to the top, the view's incredible, but you have to tell people about that view, is what I think. You've got to measure it. You've got to say, well, the view looked like this. This is how many people are involved. As a consequence of this, this is how many lives were saved. And that's the process that we're going through at the moment. But at present trend, in the way in which people are getting involved, 3 billion people will be aware of this day by the end of 2016. That's remarkable. And that's because of all of us doing what we're doing. One Young World is included in that, and I'm grateful to you. But what we're doing at Peace One Day is we created a series of properties, and I wanted to take you through this presentation because many of you are going and doing your things, your idea, to make the difference that you want to make. And this is the kind of deck that I use to do that, to explain to people what's going on. We have a series of properties, and we create investment for each of those. We're doing dance, getting people involved, doesn't cost any money, young people in schools, in youth groups, in whatever way it might be. Art has been amazing for us. Jake Chapman, one of the great artists, taking AK-47s, giving them to Damien Hirst and Anthony Gormley, turning them into objects of peace, and then creating an auction and awareness around them. It was really interesting, and it raised a lot of finance for us. Social media, obviously. The little money that we have, we invest as much as we can to get the message out far and wide. And those buzz levels, what happens in that area is very, very measurable, and it's very exciting. Global truce, I'll talk to you about it in a second, what global truce is and what that means. But the life-saving initiatives, there are many now going on in the world. Hundreds of NGOs on the 21st of September, only weeks ago, were operating in 166 countries. The education, since I began this journey, I was always going to schools. I was always speaking to young people because it was the important thing to me because I was confused and frightened, and I wanted to make sure that I was speaking to others who might feel the same in the hope of inspiring and empowering them to become the driving force behind the vision of a united and sustainable world. So we created an education resource funded by Skype in the 6 official languages of the United Nations, which gives the tools for young people to become peacemakers, to let them know that they can make a difference and they can change the world. And we are seeing registration in 197 countries with that education resource, which is incredible. The annual celebrations, the reason why we've been working with Jude and Angelina and others, and musicians like Elton John, is that unless we do that, we can't get the message out there. We can create a day of peace, and I hold a press conference, and I think it's amazing because we've got a ceasefire non-violence day, and I think that's the most important thing in the world. But if I hold that press conference, nobody comes. I mean, that's just the reality. And it was only when we started working with musicians and actors, and creating these platforms that we were able to really get the message out there. And we've just done a terrific show, watched by hundreds of thousands of people, all over the world with Elton. Film, I'm a filmmaker, and we just keep making films, and I can tell you that one of the best ways of getting the message out there is to make your own films, to tell your story, to bring it to life. And it doesn't cost anything, and you know that. But for us, we are just, we've got an editing suite with 3 systems, we've got all of our cameras, and we are just churning out all the time. Storytelling, bringing what you're doing to life is everything, I think. And then One Day, One Goal, which is a football campaign, which happens, pretty much in every country of the world, and it's extraordinary, the game of football and how it's bringing people together. I must watch the clock. I've got 6 minutes left, and I've got so much I want to tell you. But anyway, the corporate sector has been very important for us, and I know that, the same for One Young World. I mean, utilizing their finances, utilizing their workforce, utilizing their products to get our messages out there, creating a relationship that is a win-win is fundamentally important. And the corporate sector, as we know, is really driving the peace process forward. And if you look at our films, The Day After Peace, you'll see me go into much more detail about why I believe it's so important to create relationships like this. But it was this moment here. It was this moment here where, which really sealed it for me. This is the letter, in fact, from the head of the Mujahideen, writing to talk about, we won't harm any, humanitarian workers. And on the other side, you're seeing a press conference from the United Nations Department of Security and Safety announcing a 70% decrease in violence in Afghanistan. A 70% decrease in violence in Afghanistan on the day of ceasefire and non-violence. I mean, that's extraordinary. And that's what made me have this idea. If we can create a 70% reduction of violence in Afghanistan by all of us working together, because it was a huge team effort, then we can do that globally. And on my last slide in a minute, what Bob Geldof said last night, and what President Clinton said last night, and what Mohammed said last night, I mean, they wanted us to unite. They wanted us to come together as one. They wanted us to be a force that was unstoppable. And when you look at the great things that have happened, it's generally because people came together. And at the end of this, I hope that what I've done is say to you, look, let's work together. Let's build coalitions. Let's stand as one. Let's unite. Let's lift the level of consciousness around the fundamental issues that humanity faces, because we can do it. The G7 or the G20 or whatever those things were that Bob was talking about, they might not have worked, but we can work. There is hope. Peace is possible, and we can change things by working together. And Global Truths, this coalition building, I knew that there was no way that if this was about me, it was going to clearly fail. I knew that it had to be everybody's legacy that we institutionalized this day. And that's why we built these coalitions. An NGO coalition led by Interpeace, a student coalition led by the National Union of Students, and a domestic violence coalition led by EDV. And those coalitions grew very, very quickly. And hundreds of people became involved in most of the countries around the world. And I invite you to become a part of that. A One Young World coalition within itself. And on the 21st of September, when we hold this next concert, I suggest there's a representative from One Young World who stands on our stage and says, this is what we accomplished together. We accomplished action in 183 countries of the world. And that when we unite, we can be the force that we heard in those incredible statements last night. So that's what Global Truce is to try to reduce violence. And on the 21st of September, Elton and James Morrison, oh my gosh, my mouth's getting really dry and I've got 3 minutes, 36 seconds. Okay. And so a few weeks ago, we had this concert which went out everywhere. And we believe, I really believe, and the measurement that McKinsey are putting together, I will share publicly in a number of weeks' time, that on the 21st of September, just gone, there were more people participating in the peace process than has ever been recorded before. And as a consequence of that, there is a measurable reduction of violence. And as I said, we'll come out with those figures shortly, and McKinsey have been measuring it. But let me just show you something in these final few moments about how it is growing. So McKinsey is saying that peace is one of the most searched topics onto the internet. We probably realise that. But then what they started to do is look at the growth of this day. And if you look in 2010, you can see the celebration in Paris and the buzz levels that were happening. You can see, in 2011, how it increased. And what they were saying to me is you've got to look between these two markers and you've got to increase those buzz levels. So we started to do that and we looked very carefully. And through our campaigning and the things that we were doing on a monthly basis, you start to see the peaks come in. And then we held a 3-month concert before Peace Day, which is that peak there, which was bigger than the one in 2010. So this data, this measuring is everything. And it teaches me about where we should be focusing our finance and our attention. Very, very interesting to see this. This is a model about McKinsey comparing it to World AIDS Day and showing how Peace Day on an annual basis is generating more buzz levels and is becoming as globally known as World AIDS Day. And that's interesting. That means we're getting it right. And that means we're getting it right together. And that really excites me. So this is the kind of final slide. There's one more after it, but this is really what was rocking my boat. I mean, it genuinely getting me really excited. The measurement and looking at it accurately and seeing is what you're doing having the impact that you want it to have. And these 5 slides are amazing. Measuring the participation on the International Day of Peace, number 1. Because for me, if you measure the amount of people involved, that has to have a reduction of violence. If there are people participating in the peace process, then they are not participating in violence. And that's measurable. And you can come up with what is a decrease. And we will look at that more closely. But then most importantly, once you're starting to measure, you can look at the return on investment. You can look very carefully at where you're spending your money and what is getting the result. And once you've done that, you can refresh your strategy by shifting the emphasis to activities with the highest return on investment. And once you've done that, you'll establish standards and metrics for measuring violence reduction activities. This is really interesting stuff. I mean, I didn't know who McKinsey's were a couple of weeks ago, and I certainly didn't know what these charts were, but now they mean a lot to me, because I can tell you that what we are doing together is working, it's effective, it's institutionalizing the day. President Clinton, Mohammed Yunus, and Bob Geldof has asked us to show strength. What I'd like to do is say, so let's unite on the 21st of September. Whatever it is you do it, and do it on that day. And let us come together. Let us lift the level of consciousness around the fundamental issues, that humanity faces us. Let us inspire a new generation to become the driving force behind the vision of a united and sustainable world. Young people need to see case studies. Young people need to see that peace is possible, and we can demonstrate that it is. We have never, separate from politics and religion, come together as a world. That time is now. And we can say to Bob, next year at this summit, that Bob, we did show strength. We did come together. And by working together, we can create peace one day. There's 15 seconds left. I mean, I'm just really grateful. It's amazing to be here. Please mark the 21st of September. You're all amazing. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Cheers, man. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.